back to another episode of The High Ground, powered by Premier Companies. Ryan, how you doing today?
Great. Good afternoon.
Well, we got a returning guest on the line with us, and Glenn Longabaugh is on the phone with us. And for those of our longtime listeners, we don't have any callers, no call-ins yet. So
just Glenn.
Just Glenn.
Well, I'm a call-in.
There you go.
For our longtime listeners, you've had Glenn Longabaugh, our region agronomist from WinField United, with us on the phone today. And Glenn, glad you could join us.
It's my pleasure. And I'm in my rubber boots and been tromping around over in the western side of Premier service area, and it is very wet today.
Yeah, we're in the little bit of we're talking right now at the end of May, getting ready to go on a Memorial Day weekend, and it is the end of May in 2022, and we are wet, and we're not completely done planted yet, are we, Glenn?
No, actually, there's a few lucky individuals that are really far along, and there's some individuals that have not got a very good start, and there's a lot of folks in between.
That may be the topic for the day, Glenn. If we could, we don't script these, but I think that would be probably for the listeners, if we can get this podcast turned out pretty quick time, maybe Monday or Tuesday of next week. That'll give our editors some work to do over the weekend, if there is any editing. But what do we do about this late planting? Give us some of your insights from a grower perspective and from your agronomist perspective.
Yeah, so that's a great question. If we're talking about corn, obviously the season's getting long in the tooth, right? And yet this is not new to Southern Indiana, right? How many? If you think about it, it is we have a fairly high frequency of years where we plant corn after Memorial Day, and many times it's excellent corn, right? Oftentimes it's those areas that have high moisture holding capacity. And I would not be afraid to plant corn into the middle of June and still have really high expectations. You know, the difference this year might be that we actually have some hill ground and some rough ground that has just been in a pattern where it never seems to really dry up and get fit. And so those are the acres that may be in a little more jeopardy. But these areas that are a little wet-footed that normally go in a little bit late, I don't think they're in any peril at all, and I think we should stay the course and use at least mid-maturing corn, just like we always have, right? I think you know, when you talk about late planting with corn, the first thing everybody wants to tell you is, oh, don't go to early corn. Don't go to early corn. Well, I don't see that transition. You know, people that tried that 105-day stuff that's not adapted for this part of the world, it's generally disappointing. And so most people stay the course. I'm not saying you don't maybe return 118-day corn for 115 or 113 or 112-day corn. But certainly we don't ever try to ditch for early maturing hybrids. Soybeans, obviously, we still got a lot of time left, right? And, you know, we might want to start upping population a little bit, and we probably want to narrow our row width up. Probably, you know, if we have the ability to plant narrow row beans, we probably should be planting them in narrow rows from here on out, and probably should get the population up over, or at least get it to 140 and above. But yeah, it's just a cornucopia, right? There's areas where they're planted, they got a great crop, and they will probably be dry by Monday. And there's other places where they can't get planted, the water's standing, and it's still sprinkling, right? So it's kind of a tale of two cities right now.
Yeah, and it's frustrating, isn't it, for growers, Glenn, that you know, you've got a 50-acre field, and then there's those 3-acre wet spots out there, or 2-acre wet spots, and how does a grower?
Absolutely.
What's the best tactics, I guess, for a grower to manage these wet holes that are going to be there, and they're going to be in a hurry? And
yeah, well, I'd say this is going to be a year where it's going to be really fun to clean up planters at the end of the year. Right?
Yeah.
If you've never cleaned up a planter that's been drugged through mud holes, it's not very fun. And yeah, I'm not convinced that I have the answer. As an agronomist, I can tell you what I believe, and as a grower, I can tell you what I believe. But there's some space in between, right? And then sometimes we almost need to look at crop insurance, right? So these areas, if we get delayed into the middle of June, and we get past that final planting date on corn, you got to realize we actually have some pretty big guarantees. Now, as a grower and as an agronomist, we like to raise a crop, but we also have really high input prices this year. And here's what I would tell you. If I'm looking, in fact, I have this example. I've got some reclaimed coal mine ground that generally dries pretty quick, but it has some upland depressions that always kind of pond. It's kind of like what you have over by Mitchell with the sinkholes, right? And I can assure you that by middle of next week, the hillsides will all be dry and be fit to plant, but those upland depressions will not. Well, we're getting close enough to that final planting date that I probably will just go ahead and we'll plant it, and we'll just either go around them or we'll pick it up and plant, kind of carry the planter through those wet holes, and we're just make a motion, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to plant the whole field in the mud, because there's only one thing worse than planting in suboptimal conditions early, and that's planting in suboptimal conditions, suboptimal conditions in June, right? That's like the kiss of death, and we want to avoid that if at all possible. If you were patient in April, you're patient in May, by all means, don't go plant in the mud in June.
That's good insight. So some of the watch outs for growers, I guess, we know some of the risk to planting in suboptimal conditions, and I think you just summed it up. There's one thing worse than doing it early, it's doing it late.
That's right.
So,
hey, when you're looking at replant, go ahead, Glenn.
No, you go ahead. You were asked about replant.
Yeah, when we're looking at the stuff that's out there and it's rough, some of it's rough. Obviously, there's a table, and we might be able to show that towards the end of the podcast for those who watch us on YouTube. But we're looking at rough stands. I know even is important when you're talking about reduced populations, but talk to us about replant decisions at this point in time, and do I replant before I finish planting, and some of those pearls of wisdom that you have.
Yeah, boy, I tell you what, we've been walking farms all morning that have replant candidates, and so let's probably start with soybeans, because it's a little easier. On soybeans, if we have stands that are sub 80,000, then those are possibly in jeopardy. But if we have stands that are evenly distributed that are 60, 70, 80,000, I'm not convinced that I wouldn't just leave those. I would probably not even spot in, right? I probably wouldn't even add anything to them. But they need to be evenly distributed. Now, incidentally, this year, that's one of the things that seems to be kind of unusual. Normally, when you look at replant fields, it's like a calico cat, right? This area is, this area is optimal. This is a substandard, and then here's, this hodgepodge of voids out through the field, and those are pretty easy. You want to just tear those up and start over. But this year, it's so much more uniform than what we normally see. Rarely do you see, 70 and 80,000 plant stands that have a lot of uniformity, right? I was in a stand this morning that I'm sure wasn't more than 70,000 plants, and yet there were no voids in that field that were over about maybe 30 inches, right?
Wow, he got lucky.
And they got very lucky. And in fact, that's a great candidate to jack up, right? Because oftentimes when we try to intensely manage soybeans, the largest barrier to managing beans intensely is having too much population. Because if you have high population and you try to jack up soybeans, they tend to lodge, they tend to get too vegetative, they get viney, they go down, and the next thing you know, I've told you this lots of times, you're harvesting the most beautiful, big, robust 55 bushel beans you ever cut, right? But in the case of these really uniform low pop stands, if we could do that intentionally, I think we would. It's just that normally there's some mortality, and we tend to aim a little higher, right, in that 120 to 140 range. And so in soybeans, I think we're probably in pretty good shape. The other thing is, I heard an expert this morning talking about tearing up soybean stands and never spotting in, and I think that's probably not really accurate. I have talked to lots of growers about high yield soybeans, and it's actually kind of, it may be anecdotal, but it's uncanny how many growers have gone in and spotted in a substandard stand only to harvest some of the best beans that they've ever cut. And I suspect that it has to do with the length of time that we are in the reproductive stage, right? But if we are going to spot in on some soybeans, just remember that a maturity group is about 10 days. So if you started out with a 4.0 and now you're a few weeks later, you need to know that you probably need to back it off. Now, here is a rule of thumb that you may or may not have ever heard. But soybeans, though photoperiod sensitivity has an effect on when they mature, it's not all photoperiod sensitive, right? So in other words, if we take the same maturity beans and we plant them a month apart, they do not mature at the same time. So it's not just photoperiod sensitivity, and there actually is a fraction, I guess is the best way to put it, that I typically use. So for every 10 days that you delay planting, you will delay senescence about 4 days. So let's say you planted some soybeans 3 weeks ago. It's 20 days, 21 days later. Those soybeans will probably senesce about 7 to 8 days, right, later than the first planted beans. And so if you'll go in there with a 3.2, 3.4, then you're not going to have some big wide range when it comes to harvest. And so soybeans are unlike corn. I don't ever want to see a spot into corn, right? When we spot into corn, it's almost always that's a losing proposition. But on soybeans, I don't think there's harm or foul at all with going in to a 40,000, 50,000 plant stand and actually kind of freshening those up with another 60 to 80,000 plants, right? I don't think there's any harm or foul in that at all. Now, Ryan, you mentioned corn, and you talked about the table. Corn is a totally different beast, right? And we know that there's an ideal window to plant corn, and that's typically between about the 20th of April and the 10th of May. That doesn't mean that that's always the best window, but historically, that's the best window. If we plant before that window, right, if we've planted we've planted corn in early April, it hardly ever, right, I won't say it's never the best corn, but usually it's not the very best corn, but it's within a real high percentile of that maximum yield potential for a given yield or for a given field and a given year, right? So in other words, if you plant early, typically you don't accumulate GDDs quickly, you don't get a perfect stand, it may go under some suboptimal conditions, some kind of stress, but it doesn't penalize you much, right? You may end up at 96, 97% of whatever the maximum yield potential for that piece of ground was. In contrast, when we go beyond that window, right? So if we are after the 10th of May and we get into the first part of June, that penalty for planting becomes much more critical. And the plants become less forgiving, right? So if you have a less than standard stand in the ideal window or before, it really doesn't affect yield very much, right? You may only lose, for having 22,000 plants, you may only lose 10%. But if you plant in the middle of June, even with a perfect stand, you're going to lose 25%. So by all means, we always never replant, right? Here's 2 rules of thumb. Never replant until you have the rest of your crop planted, and never replant unless the table would suggest you can make more money, or make more bushels. Oftentimes we replant when, even with a perfect stand, we don't have as much potential as we had with the first stand, even though it was suboptimal in numbers, right?
Yeah, that's a hard decision when you're looking at 18 to 20,000 plants and you really wanted 30, 33, or, I mean, that becomes really tough. And
It does.
you're right to
And,
direct us to the table to try to get some guidance there.
yeah. Well, and it's just not even about the table, right? And this is why it's so important to have somebody to talk to at Premier Ag, right? Our account reps, I visited with them yesterday. We had a meeting at Bogstown, and I had a chance to visit with those guys. And I tell you, I would have every confidence that with them coming to my farm and helping me talk through this, because it's not just about the stand. We've talked about having a suboptimal stand of 20,000 plants. Well, holy cow, how about if those 20,000 plants didn't come up evenly, right? So it's not just about do we have the plants, but are the plants equally distributed? In other words, is there is there spatial variability? And then did they come up at the same time? So there's this temporal component. Is there temporal variability? The more variability there is in the stand, then the more likely you need to think about replacing that stand. But boy, don't make plans to tear up a stand here at almost the 1st of June when there's still water standing on the field and there's rain in the forecast for the middle of next week, right? You don't have to make a decision oftentimes until you get, until you really can truly assess the stand, if that makes sense.
Well, we're doing a lot of stand counts right now, Glenn. We got the interns and the account managers out there. They're using some precision planting tools to go out and do some stand counts in the field. I know they're working, be doing some throughout the weekend and into next week to get us better educated on the stands that we have in the different fields and help with growers making decisions.
Sure. I heard a rumor to that effect that you guys had the pogo stick out and the interns were all jacked up about using it. And that's a wonderful tool. That's just another example of how precision has really helped us quantify like variability, right? Whether that's temporal variability or spatial variability, and really put concrete numbers to it. And so, yeah, that's a wonderful thing.
They did a stand count in the corporate office. They had sticky notes on the floor, and they were simulating a field of corn right through the carpet. So
it was much less muddy in here.
Yes, much less muddy.
There you go. Yeah, I've got my rubber boots on, and I've still got mud above my boots. But I tell you, you've got me. I had to remove my pocket knife and throw it out the window so it wouldn't slash my wrists here, talking about replant and all these suboptimal conditions. And honestly, guys, I want to tell you something, and I told this to the group yesterday. For the most part, this corn that went in early, it went in pretty sloppy. I mean, we have some, we've got a crop that didn't really go in very well, and yet if you look at the majority of these acres, right, these corn acres or soybean acres, but especially the corn, for the way it went in, it looks absolutely fabulous, right? I mean, I told the group yesterday that this crop, for the way it went in, is absolutely a gift from God. And if you think about the parable of the talents, right? When Jesus told that parable, he basically said that the master gave talents to his servants to look after while he was gone. And one of the servants just went out and buried it, and when he got back, he had the same amount. The other servants, invested it, and when the master came back, ultimately he rewarded them for taking good care of his corn. I'm telling you, this crop was like a gift from God, and it really is shame on us if we don't really. With $7+ corn and a great stand, and in a lot of cases great color, it is shame on us if we don't really aggressively try to jack this crop up. And by jacking it up, I mean let's the next time it dries up, let's get our weed control, let's get our nutrition in place. Let's think about tissue sampling. I mean, there's just a lot of places that we can make a lot of hay in 2022, right? And we really need to recognize that for the most part, we have a wonderful we've got a wonderful opportunity to make some money in this part of the Corn Belt.
Well, I'll tell you what, that put a smile on our faces here in the podcast room, and you can go outside and pick up your pocket knife now because we're in a better place. after your the parables. So that's all I've got today, Ryan. Do you have anything else for Glenn?
No, we'll work on getting that table up just to tell everybody what you're talking about if they're not familiar with that. But thanks for coming on at a last minute notice. And yeah, we're continuing on, and it does look like a good week next week. So we're hoping to make a little more dent in what we've got to do.
Outstanding. I would have another. I would have one more word of advice, right? I'm going to say this. I hate to belabor it, but I'm going to say this because of where I'm at as a grower. I'm only about a third planted, and this is really tough for a guy that prides himself on planting early on soybeans and really pushing the borders of what we think is possible for soybean production in southern Indiana. But as I go, I think about next week and I think about all the things we need to get in order. There is a lot of balls in the air, right? We still have fields that most of the fields are burnt down, but we have fields that need residual. We have fields that need their first post pass. We have fields that need nitrogen. I mean, do not be afraid to call your premier account rep and let them help you with this crop, right? By all means, if you think you need their help, right, so that maybe you can side dress, have them maybe pick up the slack on the spraying, let them know before you go into this holiday weekend or before you get into the middle of the week, right? But
that's good insight. A lot more decisions to be made.
There's a lot more decisions to be made, right? Maybe it's the other way, right? Urea is a pretty attractive source of nitrogen. Maybe you catch up your spraying and you let them spread some urea, but just don't fail to plan, right? I think last spring I told you something about, I told you to picture making a snowball and it meant getting your crap together, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I did. And but I guarantee you for next week, I'm going to have my guns loaded.
All right.
Anyway.
Well, you're a long ways away. If you're going to call, you need to let us know.
I will do that, Ryan. Anyway, thank you, fellas.
Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Glenn. Well, that wraps up another episode of The High Ground powered by Premier Companies. Thank you very much.
Thanks.